Good morning and welcome to our amazing panelists and our audience from all over the world. Let us breathe, a Juneteenth conversation on equity, justice, and climate in the African American community. I am Dr. Tanya Calhoun with Moms Clean Air Force, where I lead the Community RX program. Moms Clean Air Force is a community of over 1 million moms, dads, aunts, uncles, godparents, grandparents alike, united against air pollution and committed to fighting for climate safety to protect our children's health. Community RX is a climate program dedicated to the advocacy in African American communities. As the country is facing a reckoning over racism and police brutality, while also confronting a global pandemic, how we make good on the promise of Black Lives Matter movement has taken on new public urgency. Our moderated panel discussion will dig deep into how air pollution, climate change, and COVID-19 disproportionately impact the African American community and what should be done to address these deep systemic issues. But first, I want to introduce our moderator, Heather McTeer Toney, who is the National Field Director at Moms Clean Air Force. And I'm sure she's going to bring some wise words before we begin. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and thank you to each of you who have joined us today for this very important day, a moment in our history like none other, and it's such a pivotal time in our history. I am truly excited to be a part of this very interactive conversation, and as we were listening to the words of Lift Every Voice and Sing, it is truly a moment in our history where we are lifting each and every voice, and we could not be blessed with a better group of people today to talk about these issues. So again, thank you to each of you who have joined us on our broadcast, who are joining us via Facebook Live, and who are just listening in from all over the country. And a special thanks to each of our panelists who I cannot wait to introduce you to. But before we begin, let's talk about Juneteenth for a moment. As we know, Juneteenth occurred on June 19th, 1865, when the final group of enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, received the news that they were free. And that was more than 2 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth represents both the good and bad in what makes the United States the country that it is. It's symbolic of liberation, but one that was delayed due to consistent opposition to resistance of equality. It's interesting that there are about 3 different stories about why the justice was delayed. One was that the messenger who was supposed to be bringing that message to those enslaved Africans in Texas was murdered. There's another story that the slave owners and landowners in the Texas area, as well as across the entire Southeast, made a committed decision to not share the information in order to get the last bit of labor out of those enslaved Africans. And then there's yet another story about the federal government even participating in delaying the information so that they could get one last harvest, one last crop from the Southeast. Either way you look at it, and whatever story you believe, it's bound in the structural racism that we experience even today in this country, and it is wrapped in what we have to change in terms of systematic oppressions for people in our country. In many ways, Juneteenth today represents how freedom and justice in the United States has always been delayed for Black people, but we must now make a change and make a difference. I'm honored today to introduce today's panelists. We have with us North Carolina Congresswoman Alma Adams from the 12th District in North Carolina, Dr. Mildred McClain with the Harambe House in Savannah, Georgia, Reverend Michael Malcom with the People's Justice Council in Birmingham, Alabama, Tina Spencer Smith with Zion Hill Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and our very own Catherine Flowers with Moms Clean Air Force coming to us from Houston, Texas. I want to say welcome and thank you to each of you. We're going to start our time this morning with Congresswoman Alma Adams, a powerful representative for North Carolina and a strong advocate for not only the people in her community, but for maternal health, Black women's health, and she's going to share a bit with us about what she's been working on. But I want to start, Representative Adams, with you to say good morning and allow you to come and talk to us about why this is such a timely topic and what you're working on. Representative Adams, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Heather, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for that kind introduction, and happy Juneteenth. I am so glad to be with all of you today on Juneteenth for this important conversation on equity, justice, and climate in the African American community. I also want to thank Mom's Clean Air Force for hosting and inviting me to join you today. Environmental justice is such an important topic, and this conversation happening on Juneteenth is all the more timely as our nation grapples with the heartbreaking murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and countless others due to the systemic racism that is still pervasive in America. There is, as we know, systemic racism in our law enforcement and judicial systems, but we also know that systemic racism is present in other facets of society, like our environmental and energy systems. And the impacts of those systems, the price we pay for pollution and global warming, it isn't paid evenly. Low-income communities and Black and Brown, tribal and indigenous communities are disproportionately impacted by negative environmental effects. Communities of color are more likely to be exposed to higher levels of dangerous air pollution than white communities, causing disparate health incomes. And coal-fired power plants are disproportionately located in low-income communities and those of color. And so I fought in Congress for more funding to help those impacted by environmental injustice. The EPA's Environmental Justice Program helps to combat these disproportionate effects by supporting and empowering communities across the nation, working to combat local pollution and environmental damage. I've been pushing for increased funding for this program, and while there's more work to be done, last year we successfully increased funding for the program by almost $3 million. Environmental injustice also directly impacts another area that I've been fighting for in Congress, and one of the major public health crises of our time, and that's Black maternal health. The U.S. is one of only 13 countries in the world where the rate of maternal mortality is now worse than it was 25 years ago. For Black women, the risk of death from pregnancy-related causes is staggering, and it's 3 to 4 times higher than for white women. The significant health disparities that Black mothers and infants face are also exacerbated by environmental racism and injustice. Black Americans are disproportionately exposed to air pollution, which research shows can increase the risk of premature birth and low birth weight for pregnant mothers. Additionally, studies have found correlations between particle pollution and high blood pressure in mothers and babies, and gestational diabetics and high blood pressure in children who were exposed to pollution in the womb. And so this maternal health crisis and all of its causes must be urgently addressed. And for me, this is a personal issue. My focus on Black maternal health began when my daughter survived a complicated pregnancy that almost claimed her life. So I knew when I got to Congress, I had to make this a priority. And in 2018, Senator Kamala Harris and I worked with the Black Mamas Matter Alliance to introduce resolutions honoring the first Black Maternal Health Week, as well as the Maternal Care Act. And so the effect led to last April, Congresswoman Underwood and I launching the Black Maternal Health Caucus. This issue was personal for both of us. We wanted to raise awareness and educate our colleagues and shine a spotlight on the maternal health crisis, because mothers are needlessly dying during what should be one of the most joyous times of their lives. Our caucus now has grown to more than 100 members in less than a year, which speaks to the importance of this issue and how it resonates so deeply within Congress and across party lines. The main goal of the caucus is to develop and advance evidence-based policy solutions to the issues impacting maternal health. So earlier this year, I joined co-chair and co-founder Underwood and Senator Harris and other colleagues to unveil a historic comprehensive package. We call it the Black Maternal Health Omnibus Act of 2020, which builds upon existing maternal health legislation by filling gaps through 9 bills that comprehensively address Black maternal health crisis. So throughout the process, we were very intentional about centering the voices of Black women and ensuring that Black women-led organizations were consulted. The Momnibus makes investments in training providers and professionals to screen for social determinants of health, including environmental risk. It also directs efforts to improve Black maternal health outcomes. It focuses on high-risk populations, including women veterans, incarcerated women, and Native Americans. So to help address the impacts of environmental disparities on mothers and infants, the Momnibus requires the EPA to commission a study on the impacts of water, air quality, and exposure to extreme temperatures and pollution levels on maternal and infant health outcomes. The study will also include recommendations on how to improve health outcomes for mothers and infants and reduce or eliminate racial and ethnic disparities in these outcomes. So with cutting edge information on the impacts of pollution and global warming of maternal and infant health, we're going to be able to better craft policies to combat their effects and the disproportionate harm that's caused to women of color. The Momnibus was a culmination of nearly a year of research, information gathering, and collaboration with our stakeholders, of course. For decades, the U.S. maternal mortality and morbidity rates have gotten worse for all mothers, but especially Black women whose health outcomes are further compounded by systemic and structural racism, including environmental racism. This Momnibus will help to address these issues because it not only targets failures in maternal health care, but it also addresses pervasive maternal health disparities through solutions that are culturally competent, comprehensive, and effective. The Momnibus provides a roadmap so that our healthcare system, our healthcare providers, regulators, lawmakers, and society will finally make Black maternal health and infant health a priority. And ensuring environmental justice for communities impacted by pollution and climate change is a vital and necessary part of that roadmap. So, because we cannot address the Black maternal health crisis without also addressing the environmental disparities that contribute to it. And no one should have to live beside a Superfund or brownfield site or in a city that's filled with air pollution or in a home with running water that is not safe. And no one should have to lose another friend, another auntie, another sister, daughter, or mom. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Adams. These are issues that are critical and important to our time. You raised some really important issues that I think are directly aligned with today and with really understanding how delayed justice and delayed access has impacted Black mothers and Black maternal health. Because as you were talking and sharing the experience of your daughter who had challenges and complications in birth, I could not help but think about how many women I too have heard from and have talked to, including people as famous as Serena Williams, who's told her story of having challenges and just being heard. It is very important for, I think, all people to recognize how important it is for us to just catch up as Black women in terms of that maternal health and people understanding how important that is to us. But you raised something that was really important. I'd love to just sort of pick your brain about it a little bit more. You specifically talked about recognizing and the demand on EPA to recognize through study the impacts of air and water pollution to maternal health, to infant health, and to do that in a way that is giving us information on how to correct the problem. Can you just talk a little bit more about why that is so important to addressing this issue for maternal health?
Well, thank you so much for your question. I think one of the things that we have to understand is EPA and all of these other organizations and entities are controlled by public policy. And public policy, while policymakers such as myself help to shape public policy, it is the public, the voters, the citizens who shape us. And I think sometimes people forget about that, about the power that they have, and they relinquish that power once they go to the polls to vote. But I'm reminded of our former president, Roosevelt, who said that the ultimate rulers of our democracy are not a president, not senators, not congressmen, not congresswomen, not government officials, but the voters of this country. And I think we need to remember that. And that means that we have to put pressure on our senators and representatives and ask them to co-sponsor the omnibus and other bills. And we have to hold these agencies accountable. And that means that you've got to, as citizens, hold members of Congress accountable. But I think the bottom line is you've got to know who is serving you and make sure that they are serving your interests. We've got hundreds of bills right now. 80% of those that have left the House have not been passed. And so we need people to bring pressure because these things really need to be addressed. We have crucial bills to help us fight climate change in that group, like the Climate Now Act, and support our nation's workers, like Raising the Wage Act. Those things are just sitting there. So I believe that, listen, a lot of policy needs to be changed, but you don't change policy until you change policymakers or to change their minds. I think that as we look at what's going on in our country today, all of the protests and the activism and so forth, people are beginning to take action in their own hands. It's all about power. And power is what makes the difference in lives and communities. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think you are definitely preaching a message we all need to hear today, which is the power is within the communities and people going to vote. I just want to ask one more thing before we let you go, Congresswoman Adams. We have over 1.2 million members in Mom's Clean Air Force, and you know that we stand strongly alongside you. Tell us what you need us to do. What do you want our members, people who are watching and listening to this broadcast, we help you to get that work done and achieved that you are so committed to and I think working so hard on? You tell us what you need us to do.
First of all, I think we need to make sure that we get the omnibus passed. These are pieces of legislation that I think will address all of the disparities that I mentioned as it relates to Black women. We are sick and tired of being sick and tired of not having the justices as it relates to our women and our children. I will tell you that people who are listening need to make calls, do whatever you do to make contact, whether you tweet, text. My president likes to tweet, so let's tweet back. But I think we have to hold our elected officials accountable. We've got more than 400 bills sitting in the Senate right now that have been passed out of the House. Legislation does not become law until it goes through the whole process. And right now it's stuck. And I think that, again, elected officials are ruled and governed by those of us who put those individuals in office, including myself. Hold me accountable too. But make the calls, tweet, send the emails, anything that you do, even call, phone calls, because those things are registered and those calls are counted. And, I will tell you that as an elected official myself, we pay attention to our stakeholders and the people who are calling. So I think that's the best thing that we can do. That's a way of lobbying. I know that we have to do it from a distance. I would say go knock on their doors. But, we close down a little bit. But that's a way to do it. Let's knock on those virtual doors and let's get the word out again. It's all about power, and we have it. And let's not relinquish that power to someone else. It's what it is. What makes the difference in lives and communities. And, power is not something you don't ask for. You don't ask somebody where it is or can you have it. You take it. And once you take it, you use it.
That's right. Well, Congresswoman Adams, thank you so much for spending this time with us this morning. And you have our full support. We're going to make sure that we have the Twitter links into the chat and that to know about the Momnibus. I've already seen some questions about making sure we know the Momnibus number so we can reference it when we make those phone calls. And we appreciate the work that you are doing. We absolutely want you to make sure that you are staying safe in the midst of coronavirus, because we gotta keep our treasures safe.
So I'm trying to do that. I'm washing my hands. I'm keeping my distance. I've got some great masks. I want to make sure that I'm keeping myself safe, but while doing that, I'm also keeping those around me safe as well. But thank you so much for all that you do. Moms, you listen, I tip one of my 1,203 hats to you.
That's what I'm going to be like when I grow up. Thank you, Congresswoman Adams.
Thank you.
Love you so much. I wanted now, we're going to be joined by another one of our panelists to come to us, none other than the Dr. Mildred McClain. Dr. McClain is, I want to say a hero, a shero, a just figure of stature when it comes to environmental justice. And she's been doing this work for years and years and years. A personal story, when I first met Dr. McClain, I don't even remember this. It was in an airport in Atlanta, and we were both going to a NEJAC conference, and I was standing behind her in line, like, I don't know who this wonderful woman is, but I just need to know her. Didn't know we were going to the same place, but since that moment and that encounter, I like to say that anytime I can sit at her feet is when I want to be there and do that. And so, Dr. McClain, we are honored to have you here with us. I know that Juneteenth is one of your favorite times of the year. And as someone who has been doing this work for over 58 years, whether it's Black people's rights, women's rights, protecting vulnerable communities, we just want you to share with us for a few moments your passion in doing this, and then we're going to jump to the questions. Dr. McClain, welcome.
Thank you so much, my shero. And I'm so excited that the moms have chosen this day to launch this discussion. It is so timely and so critical. And to the Honorable Congresswoman Momnibus, oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Just as much as I love Mom Air Force. That's a play on words, and words have power. And so we're going to exercise our power in every way we can so that we can honor those brothers and sisters, those men and women who were enslaved and could not breathe. People, children, families who had the slave master's knee on their necks, I'm sure many times was crying out for help, crying out for justice because they could not breathe. So we take the time to honor them. I have my water here. I've already made my libations to make sure that we are in sync with the spiritual part of what's going on. I want to remind everybody that breath is our connection to life. It is not until we are slapped on our butts and we grasp for that first breath that we begin our journey on this earth. It is important for us to continue to always lift up our human right to breathe clean air, to breathe the sweetness of life thereof. I'm going to take a different route to making my presentation than I normally do. So here I go. First of all, I want to honor the words of one of my sheroes. She said, this time is a wake-up call for climate advocacy groups, which are still overwhelmingly white, to learn to help communities of color achieve their environmental and energy goals, rather than simply encouraging those communities to join broader national campaigns. I think that is so powerful, because at this time of history, communities of color will be in the leadership, not only for racial justice, for economic justice, for social justice, but indeed environmental and climate justice, which are all the same faces of the same coin. It's just about justice. It's about justice for all. It's about justice for communities that have been assaulted and insulted. It's about justice for children who cannot defend for themselves. It's about us raising these voices. Lift every voice and show your power that we are unified on a common agenda, and that is environmental justice for all. My name is Marquise Green. I am 10 years old. I live in a small neighborhood located in Savannah, Georgia, called Hudson Hill. I live in this neighborhood that is surrounded by 17 industries, most of which who contribute to air pollution in my neighborhood. I live with air pollution every day, and most of the days I find it hard to breathe. I was born with asthma, as so many thousands of children throughout the United States. My name is Marquise Green. Remember my name. Say my name. Say the names of children living in environmental injustice communities, because often we call them environmental justice communities, and we have yet to achieve justice. So the environmental injustice communities that have been robbed of breath by environmental racism, environmental poisoning, environmental insults, environmental assaults, robbed of breath by multinational corporations whose profits are in the billions and the trillions of dollars, yet they do not invest in vulnerable communities, robbed of breath by industries who refuse to put people first, who refuse to put people over profits, robbed of breath by the conspiracy, yes, I said conspiracy, between our government and big business, who refuse to obey the law, comply with environmental regulations that are there to protect our people and our planet. As climate change ramps up and our government rolls back environmental protections, as people demand social, political, and economic and environmental change, as people hit the streets, as they flood the polls voting their conscience, as they refuse to spend their money with polluters, as they declare Black Lives Matters, Brown Lives Matters, Indigenous lives, Asian lives, poor people's lives, all lives matter. As we resist the tyranny of the few, as we stand against racism in all forms, we take a breath. So I'm going to ask all of my panelists and all the attendees to just for a moment, take a breath. We breathe in to center ourselves, to continue to fight for environmental justice, because after 58 years, I'm a little bit tired. But I'll tell you, I ain't no ways tired, because he didn't bring me this far. She didn't bring me this far to leave me. We still have to fight on. Fight for environmental justice, racial justice, and the preservation of Mother Earth, Momdibus, Mom, Air Force. I am so passionate, sometimes I sound like a preacher. Why? Because I'm a mother. Why? Because I'm a grandmother. Why? Because I'm getting ready to be a great grandmother. All right? So I have a stake in this fight. But my mother and my great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother died because of racism, died because they had no access to health care, died because they're still victims of plantation politics. That's why I'm so passionate. I gotta continue to work in my communities around this country to build their skill sets and their toolboxes, build their capacity to speak power, Congresswoman, to power. That's our job. Harambe means let's pull together. And we are pulling together as citizens for environmental justice. We are planeteers who are committed. We're going to take a pledge today. We're going to pledge to commit ourselves, recommit ourselves to this awesome fight, because there are children yet to be born. And when we leave this planet, it must be in a better condition than we find it today. Oh, I'm so grateful that I'm alive in this time, because it's a time such as this. I done ran over my notes, now I'm on something else. It's a time such as this that we were born for, Congresswoman, that we were born for Dr. Tanya, that we were born for Sister Catherine, that we was born for Reverend Malcom, Sister Heather. We were born for these times because the experience that we bring to the table and the youth energy that we see in the streets is going to be an intergenerational victory. And we are certain to be victorious. Environmental justice demands that people are engaged in the development and the implementation of any program, any project, any rule, any regulation, any statute that will impact their lives. But I tell you that environmental reparation is what we need, because it demands that those corporations pay me back for the health impacts that I'm suffering.
Go ahead.
Fight having been exposed to radioactive milk. You can't stop me, because I'm a soldier being groomed by the Creator and my ancestors to keep on fighting for the human right to breathe. We have a human right to breathe. Say their names. Thousands of our brothers and sisters, our fallen heroes and sheroes, at the hand of not the police, but at the hands of corporate polluters in cahoots with our government, whose job is to protect us and to guarantee our right to happiness, liberty, and the pursuit of justice. No, not just the police, but the polluters. I know my time is probably at an end, but I want to end with just this little piece. In the spirit of Juneteenth, we proclaim this day of June 19, 2020, as a day of recommitment to free ourselves from a carbon-based economy that is founded on the extraction of labor from our people. We must recommit to dismantle racism and white supremacy philosophy by philosophy, policy by policy, brick by brick, program by program, attitude by attitude, behavior by behavior, individual by individual. We recommit with every breath. Breathe, take, to eliminate the poisoning of our earth, our water, and our air. And on this day, we recommit, Congresswoman, to you and all of those elected officials that we will stand behind you. We will hold the others accountable, but you can count on us. We got your back. We will decrease the number of children who have to stay at home, missing school because it's hard for them to breathe. Pay their names, lift them up in your prayers. And just to close, I just want to say, I got to breathe. Because if I don't breathe, I ain't alive.
Go ahead.
And Ella Baker once said, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe freedom cannot rest. We who believe freedom cannot rest. It is one. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you. We will win. Pamoja tutashinde. Together, we will win. Thank you, moms. Clean Air Force. Thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you. Because without it, we'd be in a heck of a fix. Thank you.
Whew. I don't even know if the people who are watching and listening can see the rest of the panelists on screen, but we just need to take a moment, because right now, all of us, are I think we all just need to sort of sit in this moment. I know my makeup is just messed up at this point. It's just, I can't, I'm just going to have to dab my eyes here for a moment. But we need to sit in this moment. We just need to sit in this moment. And from the chat that I've seen, Dr. McClain, there are hundreds that feel those words as deeply as we do that you see on this panel. Whew. Thank you, Dr. McClain, for keeping us accountable and reminding us why we are doing this work, why it is important, and reminding us that we don't have the authority to give up. We don't have the right to give up because our ancestors worked too hard, died, and suffered in order for us to stand here and breathe and take a breath. So we can. It's not an option. It's not a consideration. It is not a moment. This is a movement, and a movement has to move. So thank you for reminding us to move. I can only get to one question, because I think if I try to do anything else, we would be out of that moment. But we have a question that comes from a young person, and I want to ask it to you, Dr. McClain, because I think it is embodying what you just said. And this young person asked the question of, what tips do you have for a young activist that wants to do as much as they can, but aren't even old enough to drive yet? And Dr. McClain, I asked you this because I know you work with young people, and you have you are the mother there in Savannah, Georgia, that has led many a young person to this activist work. So I'm going to give it back to you to answer this young person's question. And I'm going to try to fix
And I'm so excited it comes from a young person because my soapbox has been young people all of my life. I joined the movement when I was 13, so you're not too young. First of all, I would say that study, read as much as you can, so you can learn as much as you can, but sit at the feet of your elders in the communities and the neighborhoods, recording their stories, because from listening to their experiences and recording their stories, you will learn a lot about strategy, about tactics, about how you move. You have to study the historical movements in this country and worldwide, because they offer lessons learned and what we call best practices. That's very important. But you can start your own group. You can be self-determining. I always preach self-determination. Get with some of your friends. Start an environmental group or a neighborhood group where you are providing some type of service. Get in the community, get in the neighborhoods, even if it's just a clean up the block campaign. There are so many things that need to be done at the small level and at the big level. Choose a career, a profession that will contribute to the work that's being done, the body of work around environmental justice, the body of work around community-based participatory research, the body of work around racial justice, the body of work around trying to dismantle racism. There are so many things that you can do. And so I would recommend that while individual work is important, collective action is critical. So join with a few of your friends, get started, or there are already networks and organizations that are in existence that need volunteers, need interns, because a lot of our community-based organizations, we do not have a lot of money. And so you can serve as a resource to us to help us do outreach, to help us teach the young, to help us assist the elders, to help us record, to help us collect data, get involved with air monitoring training so that we can teach our people how to monitor what's going on in their neighborhoods vis-a-vis their air. But I would say, even in posing that question, that you have taken the first step in becoming an activist, an advocate, and ultimately a liberator. I hope that gives you some clue as to where you can begin. But my phone number is 912-341-9321, and you can call me directly and we can talk.
And that is why I love
that question.
I love you. I love it. Thank you, Dr. McClain. And I know we'll have somebody who'll put her contact information, her follow her on Twitter. And as I said from the beginning, and now I think y'all understand why I said what I said, like literally sitting at her feet. And when I see this woman, it does not make a difference where I am. It does not make a difference what position I am. She knows this to be true. I am trying to sit at her feet and just soak up as much as I can. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Dr. McClain. I know you'll be a part of our conversation coming on a little bit later. We're going to keep on with this spirit of faith in this movement, which I love. I want to first stop for a moment and just say welcome to all of our folks again who have either recently just or who are joining us via Facebook. We're having a wonderful, engaging conversation about equity, justice, and climate today here on Juneteenth. We've been already really just drenched in wisdom from Congresswoman Alma Adams and from Dr. Mildred McClain. And now we're going to go over to our good Reverend, who has Michael Malcom, who has transitioned from pastoring for a little while, hopefully just to focus on environmental advocacy for 100%. But he has been a friend of Mom's Cleaning, works with us, has been at our meeting, has spoken for us, and we know that as you are committed to this. Welcome, Reverend Malcom, and please share with us some of the parallels between Juneteenth and our continual fight for fairness. I'm going to turn it over to you in whatever way. Just know my makeup is already from Mother McClain, so take it easy on us, sister.
Listen, I was actually going to ask you if it was all right for us to just go and take up an offering and open the door to the church, because Dr. McClain done preached a whole sermon. I'm talking about a whole one. Yeah, I'm talking about y'all. I saw all y'all ladies just crying up something. Whoa. And I want to cry, but I can't. So I wanted to run, but I knew I was on camera. And if I did, that y'all see my messy room. So I just want to listen. That was awesome. That was awesome. Thank you, Moms Clean Air Force. I am grateful to be with you all. Thank you, Dr. McClain. Listen, you rock my world. I knew you would. In fact, when they told me that I would be coming behind you yesterday, I was extremely nervous, and now I'm petrified. So let me see if I can't walk this thing out a little bit, if that's all right with you all. Thank you also to Tanya for the invitation, and Heather for seeing me worthy enough to sit on this platform with, just a robust group of people that I know are mighty. And my friend Tina's coming up pretty soon, and you better bring your towel out, is all I'm saying. Not just your napkin, but bring a towel, a whole towel. Listen, I can't breathe. There are 3 words that are etched in the Black experience. The slow, agonizing death of being deprived of oxygen until you are robbed of life is nothing new to the Black experience. Each time a life is taken, it is a reminder that we are next. It is an emphasis on our lived experience and limitations that are placed on that experience. We are not expected to move beyond our station of servanthood. We are not to operate outside the status quo. We can't move where we want. We can't run where we want. We can't go to school where we want. We can't go to parks where we want. We can't go even be seen where we want. I can't breathe is heard in the hallways of elementary schools that are filled with toxins from industrial pollution that surrounds their communities. I can't breathe is heard in emergency rooms that have turned away patients and told them to self-care at home, when in all actuality, as Jackie Patterson has said, it most certainly leads to death. I can't breathe from throats being squeezed by arms that swore they would protect and serve, like pythons slowly robbing another living being of life. I can't breathe over loose cigarettes. I can't breathe over Skittles and a tea. I can't breathe over CDs. I can't breathe because you're simply having a bad day and you went to the wrong house and you felt threatened and you felt like you couldn't get out of it and you needed some help. I can't breathe because of misconceptions and stereotypes. I can't breathe. We are not safe and we are not okay. The viewing of the senseless murder of George Floyd once again put us on full display that Black bodies, and in particular Black male bodies, are constantly under attack. However, it is not just that the body is being attacked, it is also the mind that's being attacked. You see, there's a psychological breaking that happens each and every time. It is a message for us to stay in our place, to stay in the place that doesn't rattle that white world, that it stays happy in our misery. In our home, we've always taught our kids to try to embody some sense of somebodyness, and when they leave our homes, it's challenged in the streets. As a Black father, my rage gives way to fear that no white father could ever really know. Not only can I see myself in George Floyd, but I also see my sons in Botham Jean or Ahmaud Arbery or Trayvon Martin, and the countless other faces that we have hurried into the presence of the ancestors. The Emancipation Proclamation eradicated the system of slavery. It helped those who had been in bondage to throw off their shackles of oppression. It declared freedom for impoverished conditions. It declared freedom from toxic conditions. It told of people who have worked 6 days a week from sun up to sundown that they can finally have a couple of days off. Yet 2.5 years after this seminal proclamation, we know that it was not the lived experience for everyone. 2.5 years after this proclamation, it took Major General Gordon Granger bringing his regime to Texas that they eventually relented from owning black bodies. Yep, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was announced. Although it meant them not owning black bodies, it still did not stop them from harming black bodies. You see, although we are no longer under the whip of chattel slavery, we are still suffering nonetheless. Just as it was then, it is now. The snuff films of black bodies being harmed are an indication that we are still waiting to be considered human. However, I'd like to draw your attention to environmental racism. Environmental racism deals with the protections of people that are being disproportionately harmed by pollution. The evidence has shown that communities of color are more likely to be harmed by disproportionate polluting facilities in their communities. However, I think that we should look a little bit deeper. Not only are our communities being robbed of health, they are also being robbed of economics and better living conditions. Because of subsidies, we are left with pollution and with poverty. The pollution not only drives the property taxes, the property down, but it contributes to poor health. Whether it's a knee on the neck because of police brutality, a community under assault of toxic pollution, or public policy that allows for pollution in communities, the bottom line is we can't breathe and we need change. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Look, I'm already giving you a Dr. Malcolm. I'm claim it. We're just gonna go ahead and claim it. But Reverend Malcolm, you listen, that is absolutely important, and it is such an important line to draw between the fact that the not having breath and the control of African American bodies and what our bodies are functioning to do, just drawing that line to today, and how there's so many communities that are still controlled by, as Dr. McClain said, the polluters. It's more than just the police, it's the polluters that are impacting lives of mothers, children, our elders, just based upon where they are, and recognizing that too is keeping us from breathing. It's, when I hear the words, I can't breathe, I know in the environmental community, but just in the Black community, period, it means so much. Those words are so full because it is, I can't breathe from air pollution. I can't breathe from police brutality. I can't breathe because of the economic disparities, because I got to go to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is so much that is compiled that comes with those very simple words that makes this moment of reckoning critical for our future survival. And I appreciate you for drawing that line there. I think a great question that I would love to pose to you, because you have worked in and on the ground with communities, and you've seen things up front and close in terms of the disparities that are existing, especially in the Southeast. You're in Birmingham, Alabama, not Mississippi. And I guess my question to you, Reverend Malcolm, is the South waking up? Are we seeing the Black folks in the South where typically think that there's not a lot of activism going on. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's happening in the South? I know your finger's on the pulse.
Let it burn, let it burn. Let me tell y'all, man, these young folk ain't tripping. I'm gonna dispense because this excites me. Because I listen, my millennials, I ride hard for my millennials because they are amazing to me. They have looked in our history's past and said, we reject your history. We do not want that for our future. And instead, they have planted their feet in truth, in equity, in justice, and in inclusion. And they have said, we will not be moved. We won't change. You will. And listen, I'm 100% trying my best to push them on to continue. And when you look at what's happening in Atlanta and Birmingham and Mississippi, when you look at what's happening in Texas, these young people are saying enough is enough. They're saying we're not waiting on y'all to change it anymore. Y'all took too long. We won't change, and we want it now. And I'm pushing to help change it. We, unfortunately, in particular, in I would say in many of the black churches, or my black church experience, and I've been black my whole life, grew up black and gonna die black. And in my black church experience, we have somehow mixed our theology with respectability politics. And so we have lost sight on the Jesus that turned over tables. In fact, I believe today if Jesus went in a temple and turned over tables, we'd call for him to be arrested. I really believe that.
That's a message.
Which is sad, because that means that we don't identify with the Christ. We have got to be transformational, and our young people are teaching us what it's really like to embody transformation, and I'm loving it.
That's a message. And I know we're going to come back to that, and I'm trying to make sure we got time to come back to that, because, you know, that political point that you just made, and seeing, you know, where we are as a people and what our churches are doing. I know Tina Spencer Smith is going to come right behind you, and I know she's going to pick up right where you left off. But I think that is a point we have to reckon with, understand, but also for the environmental community, it has to be understanding of culturally how we talk to one another. You know, what moves our communities, because we all want the same thing. I think often we just haven't figured out how to talk to each other and how to identify with these commonalities. So we're gonna come back to that, but thank you, Reverend Malcom, and I just want to highlight that there have been a number of comments that really want to say thank you as a Black man in this experience. Thank you as a father in this experience. Thank you for standing up and singing these words. Because all too often, sometimes folks don't think that Black men are a part of this conversation, and that there are dads out here just like there are moms out here, and we are all concerned about the same thing. So thank you for being here and showing up, and we're going to come back, but we're going to keep on going, because we're going to come right over to Sister Tina Spencer Smith. I'm so glad that you are here, and you are here to present and share with us. You have been on the front lines of coronavirus, talking about this in your congregation, providing information into your faith community. I know you are wearing a number of hats, and just looking at sections of this work, particularly in the African American faith-based community. Thank you for being here with us, and I would love for you to take a few moments to talk to us about Juneteenth, why it's so important, and your passion for what you're doing right now.
Thank you so much, Heather. And I do call him Dr. Malcom as well, my good friend. Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate all of the insight and information provided by each of the panelists. As we convene today, we come bringing into dialogue the obvious number representing the commemorative 19th day of the 6th month in 1865 and the 19th year in this 21st century that has now become a part of the moniker of a global pandemic. In addition to the numerical commonality of these events, the oppressive nature upon Black Americans leading to these events is evident. The oppressive consciousness that led slaveholders to deny Texas slaves the freedom they already had is equivalent to the mindset that generates structural and systemic racism and inequality in our country that has left African Americans harmed and disproportionately impacted by environmental injustices that over time manifest into forms of deeper yet different injustices. It brings to mind environmental humanities scholar Rob Nixon's phrase, low violence, which he uses to describe environmental degradation that places upon the marginalized and underserved communities, and let me be clear, those who are Black, poor, and of color, a slow violence that is not instantly newsworthy, but can have delayed adverse impacts upon the people. The slow violence of environmental injustice is invisible in our communities. In a recent ethnographic study that I conducted at my church, Zion Hill Baptist Church in South Fulton, Atlanta, Georgia, pastored by the Reverend Dr. Aaron L. Parker, the study revealed that while we connect faith in caring for the environment, the concept of environmental justice was not readily recognizable. In fact, of the research participants, about 78% were unfamiliar with the phrase environmental justice. The slow violence of environmental injustice, as Nixon describes, is not a noose or a knee on the neck. However, in the context of today's social landscape, it is indeed a noose or a knee on the neck. Why? Because slow violence is a slow violation of rights. Our right to life, our right to not just breathe, but to breathe clean air and live a healthy life. Poor air quality can lead to underlying conditions yielding increasing susceptibility to COVID-19 and a COVID-19 death rate of African Americans higher than that of whites, even though our population makeup is smaller. So in the middle of protest and a pandemic of COVID-19, what is the response of the faith community? In the Black community, the church has long been at the core of seeking justice for those on the margins and providing a safe place for people. Even the early celebrations of Juneteenth were coordinated by the local churches. Today, churches continue to provide solace for the people. Speaking specifically of my church, Zion Hill Baptist Church, our pastor, Dr. Aaron Parker, moved swiftly in response to the pandemic, making safety a priority for our members. Our church transitioned to virtual worship services before most local churches and ahead of Georgia governor's issuance of a statewide shelter-in-place mandate. Zion Hill is a 148-year-old historical multi-generational church. With the need to reach a member base of nearly 5,000, Dr. Parker's approach has been and continues to be prayerful and intentional. First, his message has been clear that the response of our church to move to and remain in virtual operations is simply out of the love for the people, not out of fear, but love. His messaging, prayer, and spiritual support for the people in the community have been key. He continues to emphasize God's word through our weekly Bible study and sermons, encouraging members in the community to stay engaged and encouraged and hopeful. We've created our own COVID-19 task force. We have increased communication significantly using a multi-channel communication platform that includes traditional and digital media. We have converted our campus in collaboration with community partners to a COVID-19 testing site. Our outreach at Zion Hill is extremely critical, but right now we have put in an intentional focus on outreach so that those who have been affected by the virus and are in need, Zion Hill is there to help. Our goal is to keep our members informed, encouraged, and inspired in standing in the truth so that we can individually and collectively be the best that God has called all of us to be, because Black lives matter. Let us breathe.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. That was so full of things we need to hear repeatedly and loudly. The idea and concept of slow violence, I think people don't really get that that is what has been the embodiment of the Black experience since 1619. And just Africans in this country have experienced this slow violence. And I think also of it as a being visibly invisible. We are here and we are experiencing these things, but it is not acknowledged in a human manner. And saying, I think, that what the church is doing goes completely against what we see on media. It goes completely against what people in the stereotype is, which is that Black churches aren't following up. And you are saying a case study for what I know not only is happening at your church, churches all around the country. Black people take care of each other and ourselves because there's not a reliance on the structural system to make sure that we're taken care of. Now, I heard, I know there was a Facebook copy or a video going around of a church. And I don't know the name of it, but I was watching the pastor, and he was very clear when he said, "We're not coming back till the governor's mansion opens up. We're not coming back to church." They allow, until they have tours in the White House again. We're not coming back to this house until their house opens. I got what he was saying, and it's similar to what I'm hearing from you, which is we have to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves in these spaces as we are working towards racial and equitable justice. And that is so important. And my follow-up question for you is, has there been a challenge in getting that done within the church? Have you all run into any friction with people who either didn't understand or didn't get it? Or did everybody sort of seem to say, okay, this is important and we've got to move this way to protect ourselves?
I have to tell you, Heather, the church has been incredibly supportive. And I think it goes back to Dr. Parker tying this to the spiritual aspect and us being spiritual beings. Everyone is on board because we know the church family and the community understands this is about the safety, the well-being, and the health of not just our church, but the community at large. And we all want to remain safe.
I love it. We work closely along with the National Baptist Convention and the Women's Auxiliary and all of our good friends and family there, and it is so important that we all stay safe. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us, and to know that these studies are taking place, to know that this data is available, that there is research going on in these spaces, and that we should be listening to it in order to develop culturally competent solutions. Thank you for doing this work and for making sure that this data is being seen and heard. Thank you. Yes. Before we move on to our last speaker, and before we just sort of jump into some of our really good discussion here, I want to again say welcome to those of you all who are just joining us. This is our second hour and our last hour of this session. We've been thoroughly thoroughly blessed by speakers who have come to us, Dr. Mildred McClain, Congresswoman Alma Adams, Reverend Michael Malcom, and now Reverend Tina Spencer-Smith. Thank you so much. We are going to hear from our very own Catherine Flowers. Catherine is a Moms Clean Air Force organizer in Texas. She's in Houston, Texas. And so we're ending this portion with Catherine because she is in the place where the Juneteenth celebrations began in the state of Texas. And Catherine is going to come to us in her own way, but I want to first say, Catherine, we are so glad to have you as a part of our Moms Clean Air Force team. And then we are super grateful that you bring to us your story, your work, and I want to congratulate you on your New York Times quote that you had yesterday. The New York Times ran a story about Black women who are unfortunately dying as a result, not getting the health care that they need when it comes to maternal health, exactly what Congresswoman Alma Adams was discussing earlier. And you had a great quote in the New York Times, Catherine. Congratulations on that and on your work. So I want to just turn it over to you, Catherine, to talk about this from your perspective, being there in Texas.
Well, thank you. And thank you. I'm so grateful to the leadership of Moms Clean Air Force, to Tanya, to you, to our founders, for the opportunity really to stand on the shoulders of Representative Allen and Dr. McClain, because I didn't always feel like I had permission, right? As a woman of color, even though I knew it was my responsibility to lead and to speak for people, I didn't always feel like I had permission. Talking about the Mominous bill, when I had my daughter, and she was premature, my water broke early. I was 7 months pregnant, had gone to the emergency room, and remembering there were no people of color at the hospital. But they had the audacity to tell me that I wasn't even pregnant. They were like, your water didn't break. They literally said to the nurse who was taking care of me, was like, your water didn't break. And they tried to have me committed, right? They tried to send me to the psych ward because they didn't think I looked pregnant enough or whatever the case may be. And so finally my doctor had to come in, and it was just crazy. And so oftentimes we are looked over, or we are told that we're crazy or we're too loud or whatever it is. And so it creates this culture that we need permission. And so I can't say how grateful I am to be in this space right now and to have heard Dr. McClain. And I felt like she gave me permission. Interestingly, 3 months ago, Heather, on our team meeting, I told a story about an experience that I had in a room of folks who I felt like they took away my power. They told me they didn't care what I had to say about our communities. Because the truth is, Houston, we have a problem. We are struggling. We have, some of the highest rates of pollution, and we know that through COVID, we have more people of color being affected. And so it is our time. And so I just want to paint a picture, but I also want to start. Thank you for acknowledging the New York Times. Again, I could not have done it without our incredible team, the executive team, the communication team. But the quote that has been shared on Twitter and LinkedIn is, doing nothing about air pollution, which so clearly has a greater impact on Black Americans, is racism in action. Like, sometimes we don't know what to call it, or we can't put a face on it, but every time they try to pull us down, or every time they try to make it harder, that's what racism looks like. And so it is interesting that Juneteenth, and at first, I didn't even subscribe to Juneteenth because I was mad. right? We're celebrating that we were late, that we heard about being freed late. That is the epitome of what we have had to endure our entire life cycles, right? We're always being told late, or we're always not included at the table. But it is our time to start bringing chairs and tables to the room. And so again, the panelists, thank you guys. You have really given us permission and reminded us that we can and we should. And so people often think of Houston as this country, you know, the Western, they think about the cowboy hats and so forth. But the truth is, Houston doesn't have a cowboy path. It was never a wild, wild West town. They didn't have cattle drives that went through it. Houston was a real estate town. Like, it was boomed because of real estate. You know, it was a modern city built on transportation, trade, innovation, and big business. But all of that was never designed for us. In Houston, we have the largest food bank in the world. We have the largest medical center in the world, but we have the most uninsured citizens than any other state in the nation. We have more people that make minimum wage than any other city in the nation, but people are paying 60 to 80% of their income on rent. So that means they're also food insecure. It also means that our public school system is just the injustices there, that they create buildings. They actually build buildings that have pollution in it. Like, the floors are contaminated, or they still use lead paints. They still use things that damage our children. And it is unacceptable. But perception is reality, right? They just think, oh, that's Texas, their country. And no, Texas, especially Houston, is a model for the rest of the nation. Dr. Stephen Kleinberg out of Rice University, he is a demographics expert and a sociologist. He does this Kinder Institute survey every year, and every year it is proven that empirical evidence that people need. Houston is actually a model for the rest of the nation. So the truth is, if we can't get it done in Houston, it's not going to be done anywhere else. And so we want to create models. We want to give people permission to fight, because we have a right to clean air. Oh my gosh. As a survivor of Hurricane Katrina, right, we were called refugees. We were called so many different things, because although I'm not from Houston, I arrived just in time. We saw during that time that, you know, there were hundreds of thousands of us that came over from New Orleans. Almost 200,000 eventually passed through. 80,000 people stayed. And we've learned that some things are just a basic right. Housing, you know, quality housing should be a basic right. Quality education should be a basic right. But at bare minimum, clean air should be a right. And so the fact that we have to fight for something that everybody else gets is just, we have work to do. And so as we have this opportunity to come together and talk about how do we make it work, part of my role as an organizer in Texas is, one, making sure that we are providing tools for our toolkits. And so to everyone that is listening, to everyone who is on Facebook, you have permission. It's funny. Sometimes you just need to hear it. Sometimes it's, you hear it from the people that you are enamored by or that you respect. When Heather said to me, Alan, be bold, be passionate, and don't make, you know, you don't have to ask permission. Oh, it was like I heard it for the first time. Although I've made this work my career, like this is what I've done all my life, as you move to new levels, sometimes you just want to be validated. And So if I can offer to everyone who is listening, you belong at this table. And so we give you permission. We give you permission to be a part of the Moms Clean Air Force as we build capacity in communities, as we advocate together. And another tool is collaborating, right? I can't do the work that we do in Houston without partners. And so there are amazing organizations like the Environmental Defense Fund, One Breath, Air Alliance, and go on and on and on. The Houston Climate Movement, Sunrise. And so find a space where you feel like you belong and that you feel like you can collaborate, because collaboration is key. There is no one person that does great things. It is always a team. I also want to encourage folks that are listening. This is a time, as we have had to shelter in place, and I have become an expert on all things the internet. Participate in capacity building. Harvard University is offering free classes on how to impact climate change. I mean, there's so many universities right now that is offering it for free. And so oftentimes we don't want to speak because we think we don't know. Dr. McClain talked about it when she was given that advice. It's not just for young people. It's not just you sitting at the feet of people. Sometimes us, our old, I consider myself still young, but there's still room for growth. And so take advantage of all the resources that are now available. Right, my generation is, and Heather's in this generation with me, we're the smartest that any generation has ever been. We have more degrees and we have more exposure. But the truth is, we have to continue to evolve because knowledge is power. And so just because you think it doesn't make it so. But building capacity is so important. So take advantage. That's another tool for our toolkits. And lastly, do something. One of the things, again, that I'm so excited about being a part of the Moms Clean Air Force team is that every day we do something. I am so encouraged and so motivated because sometimes I feel like I have to keep up with Nevada or New Mexico. And when I see what they're doing, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that. But not only can you do it, but you don't need permission. Do something. And so as we are here today in this space to celebrate Juneteenth, because it really is a celebration, because now we know, right? Juneteenth was about the folks who didn't get a chance to learn until 2 years later. We now are bringing our own tables and chairs to the room. And we have permission. We have the capacity. All we have to do is do something. And so collaborate with the groups you love the best. We invite you to be a part of what we're doing in Texas, because I hope to bring Texas and Houston to the forefront. Because again, if it doesn't happen here, it's going to be a struggle for the rest of the U.S. We're the most diverse city in the nation. More than 100 consulates are housed here. We have the 5th largest Black population behind Detroit. We are doing it here, but we need people who want to make it happen. And so thank you, Heather. Thank you all for allowing me to be here and to help speak the truth of the communities who do not have an opportunity to be involved because they don't feel like they have that voice. But I am grateful and I'm excited and I am looking forward to the great things to come.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Thank you for those very powerful words and for bringing it full circle for us, what we can be doing right now, what's happening in Texas right now, and what we should be acknowledging and looking at and looking to in our future. We appreciate the work that you're doing and sharing your journey and your stories and being that bold and passionate person. It is all what we want to see at Moms and throughout the country. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Whew, I just feel like, this is one of those moments where it is a collective breath of clean, fresh air that has been filled with wisdom and intellect and so much spirit. I see my dear friend and sister Tanya, who's doing the same thing. She's taking this, and as Dr. McClain asked us to do, just sort of take some deep cleansing breaths. If you are joining us via Facebook Live or you are joining us via the broadcast, I invite you to take a moment and a deep breath, because we have received a lot. We have received a wealth of information. As we take this deep breath, I want to acknowledge dear Congressman Bobby Rush, who really wanted to be here with us today at this moment. Today is Juneteenth, of course, and a very special day for him as well. And unfortunately, he was unable to make it and be with us, but he sends his regards. He sends his love to Mom's Clean Air Force. He is promising. When he called me, he said, please don't put me off. I said, absolutely not. You know, you are a friend, a dear friend to Mom's, and we love you dearly. So he cannot be with us today, but he is sending his warmest regards. And we're sending our warm regards to Congressman Bobby Rush as well. Thank you for always being a part of our hearts and our work and the work that you're doing for climate action in that district. We're going to now move into some good probing conversation, because we have heard from all of these amazing panelists. And as we sort of jump into this very free-flowing conversation, I hope we're going to be able to just talk here for a moment. And I invite each of you to jump in the discussion. I also invite all of our attendees, if you have questions for us, please post them into the question and answer section online. We can get your questions, and I will do my best to try to field some of them. This is a wonderful time to ask questions of this amazing group of experts that we have here and who are sharing with us. So don't be shy, put your questions in, and I'm going to do my best to try to get to them. But let's just start off and jump right in. We are in the midst of seeing a radical, and what Mom's Clean Air Force is calling a racist agenda from EPA. And it has come in the form of 100 rollbacks, at least 100 rollbacks that have a tremendous impact to Black and Brown communities. I want to talk about that for a moment, because, as we have seen over the past couple of months, the rhetoric is becoming clearer and clearer that it is racist. We are seeing more allies come to the forefront of these movements, this movement that we're in for racial equality and equity. We're seeing things I know I haven't seen in my lifetime, of businesses and leaders calling out everything from changing the state flag here in the state of Mississippi, and NASCAR getting rid of the Confederate flag and not allowing it to, seeing on Netflix whole channels about Juneteenth and Black Lives Matter. This calling out of racism, can we trust it? Let's just talk about it. Let's just be real here for a minute. Black folks, we've seen this before. Can we trust this moment right now? And I want to start with our elders, because I know you've seen these movements. Can we trust what we're in? How should we feel about this?
I think we can trust it a smidgen, because we have a tendency to get caught up in the moment, and we become emotional and we become passionate, and our activism shoots off the chain. But I want to remind us that this is not the sprint. This is the marathon. And most of us are prepared for just the sprint portion. Let me just do my little quarter mile and then I'm done. No, it's a 5-mile race, and we need everybody, all hands on deck. But I'm cautiously optimistic, because as Reverend Malcom referred earlier, about this incredible youth energy. And all the people on this line, on this panel, and probably most of the attendees started off their work as a young person. Some of us along the line, we gave up. Most of us old heads, I'm being called an OG environmental justice pioneer. I about fainted. But I say that to say that we have to keep our hands on the plow. And we used to have a notion about passing the baton on. That period is over. It's no passing the baton on. It's sharing the baton. The hope that I see is I witnessed 3 little 11-year-old white girls posting up Black Lives Matter. That was hopeful. But in the very same instant, I saw a maybe 30, 35-year-old white man jump off of his bike and accost these young white girls, snatching the posters, Black Lives Matter, out of their hands, off of the places where they were posting them, and actually kind of assaulting them. So at this moment, you have this dual track where a lot of white people are waking up because they have to speak truth to power. They have to organize in their communities. They have to organize the Trumpsters. As Miss Heather said, don't be coming up in our community, always want to lead us, but we can lead ourselves. You go over there and do your work, and we're going to do our work, and then we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. So we have this dual track where you have the right wingers doubling up and doing something that was done during the COINTELPRO. I don't want anybody to ever forget that. When they would send people in masquerading as protesters, as pro this and pro that, when actually they're being sent there to move on this slow violence piece. They're sneaking in and they're doing the looting and they're putting it on true people who are there speaking truth and fighting for their lives. And so on the one hand, yes, I'm optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic because we have a tendency to fall into amnesia real quick because we get a few little reforms, a little money in the bank, you know, a couple of us get a couple of new cars and, well, you know what I'm saying? We be bought off real quick. And then it goes back into like this lull. Because I want to remind everybody, we've been here before. We've been at this juncture.
Several times.
We've been here before, and look at where we are now. That's why I said I'm reflecting on 58 years of activism, advocacy, and revolutionary movement. Because I ain't just now, you know, like doing that little protest thing. I'm all the way in from training my children, my grandchildren, my neighbors. But I don't want us to forget that we've been here before, and what we have to do is, as I said earlier, recommit until victory is won. That's what the song says. We're going to march on. We're going to fight on. What? Until victory is won. So we got a little opening. So we have to take advantage. Let's seize upon this opportunity in a way that we haven't before. So that's going to require some new thinking. And it's going to require a few of us to fall back. Now, you know, some people get kind of, you know, they Hollywoodish and they like that camera and they be taking them selfies and they on the blueberry, the blackberry, the raspberry, your berry, my berry. And then when it's all over, they back home business as usual. I'm sorry. I just had to throw that.
That's McClain. Woo! Reverend Malcom. I know. Go ahead.
Dr. McClain, we're going to take a little shade with that shake, yeah? I know you gave us the shake, but we're going to take that shade you threw right there with it, too.
Excuse me, Reverend, excuse me.
One of the things that I ride hard for my young people. I love that energy. But one of the things I do want to caution them on is strategy. Oftentimes with that energy, it prompts us to move, and we want to move fast, and we want it to be solved right away. And and we allow for emotions. And I'll be honest with you, part of the reason why, or I see part of the reason why the movement that is now created has been infiltrated by destruction is because of the lack of strategy. If you had a strategy going in, then you'll know when people do this, that, and the other, they stand out as those who are outliers, and they're not a part of the movement. And you can clearly point them out. But right now, you can't really clearly point out who's doing what. You know, in Atlanta, when Rashard, I can't think of his last name, but when Rashard Brooks was murdered the other day, they came. There was a great crowd that came out to protest, but there was one lone person who was completely covered up, white lady, completely covered up, that set the fire to the Wendy's. Had they had strategy going in, then they would have clearly been able to get her taken care of, so they would have known she ain't a part of what we're doing. I don't know what she on. And the narrative is protected that way. The whole destruction piece is to change the narrative so it doesn't be about justice. It's all about look at what them blah, blah, blah out there doing. So you've got to protect that narrative. I'll say this to any young person that's listening at me right now. Keep your phone on. Keep your camera on. When they being destructive, you make sure you put it out there and let everybody see who's doing what, so we can protect the narrative. Because this thing, as Dr. McClain has said, and I've heard pointed out several times, this thing ain't a sprint, it's a marathon. It's going to be a long journey. And that tiger is on his last leg and got one tooth left. But that tiger dangerous. That's dangerous because it knows it's about to die. So it's fighting for his life. And even after we saw George Floyd heinously murdered in front of our faces, and there was these uprisings that took place, do you know that they now had about 5 bodies that they found hanging from trees?
Yes.
That they killed themselves? Yes. It's going to get worse before it get better. We're in for a long fight. Learn how to strategize so you'll be able to tackle the obstacles that come up during this fight, or else you're going to get weary.
Yes, yes, yes. Ooh, I think you pace yourself. That's what I've been saying. I've been saying pace yourself, because we talk about this analogy all the time. I run, and I saw where somebody put in the chat, it's got to be a triathlon. I do triathlon, so I understand completely. You got to pace yourself, and you have to understand who's responsible for doing what at what point in time, so that we are collectively getting as much out of the moment as humanly possible. And that there are distractions out there, right? You know, EPA is using all of the distraction of the police brutality and coronavirus. And it's important. It's not a distraction to us, because these are things that are impacting our nation, the community, the people we love and live around, but they're using it to pass regulation. And we still got to keep up. So you're absolutely right. You got to pace yourself. We come to this awareness, what's happening around us, and we have to figure out how to do this together. We got a couple more questions here. I want to, and we have a question for Tina Spencer Smith, and I'm going to try to it's 2 parts of the question. I'm going to actually take the second part first, because it goes right along with what Brother Malcolm here was saying. It says, how do we continue to strengthen the cohesiveness of the groups, as well as promoting faithful environmental consciousness? And I think that's an important part. It's just, how are we really continuing to support all of us working together as we're talking about and promoting our environmental consciousness? And then with the social distancing restrictions that are in place, what are suggestions for activities for church ministries whose focus is environmental stewardship and creation care. How do we do that in this new virtual environment? I'm going to turn that one over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I'm going to go to your second question first. How do we ensure or maintain that our membership focuses on environmental stewardship in the virtual space? I think it is an opportunity to raise awareness and an opportunity to educate, because from an environmental perspective in the faith community, we do connect the two, but understanding about environmental justice is another layer and another level that we as a faith community can utilize that opportunity to bring awareness to our communities. We have specifically at Zion Hill, one of the things that we've done is we share with our community base what we're doing. And for example, we have continued to share our newsletter. Our newsletter has transitioned to digital, but we continue to, one of our recent stories was about environmental stewardship at our church and the fact that we're using recycled bags and reducing water consumption. And so being able to continuously tell that story. And what you hear over and over is, once you tell that story over and over, it starts to be able to stick, and people start to implement those things, not just in the church environment, but at home. But of course, while we're operating virtually, you hear those things in the virtual space, and then you implement them in your home space. So continuing to educate with the tools that you have in terms of digital media. And then your first question, Heather, what was the first question? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. How do we continue to strengthen the cohesiveness of our group, as well as promoting faithful environmental consciousness? And I'll tell you, I guess I take that to mean, how are we continuing to really pull together all aspects of our community, talking about eradicating racial injustice, and at the same time, really promoting faithful environmental consciousness?
So I think I heard someone say earlier on the panel that justice is justice. So yes, it may look a little different because it's environmental justice, but it's still justice. It is still standing in the gap for those who are on the margins. And so what I say to that, in the faith community, continue to lift and encourage from a spiritual perspective. You can pick up the good book, and you have your stories, you have your blueprint, you have your pathway in terms of how you keep your people together. And I think you meet people where they are. You meet people where they are. And everyone, I think I wrote down when someone was speaking a second ago, flexibility, that we should be flexible. So your walk and what you do and bring to the movement in terms of the space might be different than the next person, but also be flexible in terms of how you approach and what your response is. So I believe continuing to keep that message and stay faithful. And I'm going to go back to your question, Heather, about being trustful. Put your trust and faith in God. Put your trust and faith in your Creator, and know that there are no mistakes, and that each and every moment that we live is purposeful. And so while it may take a little longer to get to the end of the road, you keep going, because as Dr. McClain said, it's a marathon, it is not a sprint. So while we have slow violence and suffering is long, we respond to that with a long advocacy, long justice, long standing in the truth for the people. So keeping your community together with communication and staying connected and keeping everyone engaged and letting them know that their faith community is still there. They haven't left. We're still here. And that's what we say to our church. We're still here. And we continue to remind them why we're here and our purpose, and that God is in control.
Hey, that's it. Reminding, and that accountability is so important. And that's one of the things that Congresswoman Adams, she led us on, that accountability and recognizing the power that we have. Catherine, a question has come in about how do we use that, in your experience as an organizer. The question is it more effective to post your own letter protesting a particular rollback or action from EPA that EPA is doing? Is it more effective to post your own rollback on an action from moms or any other environmental group, or to send the letter directly to your congressperson or the agency administrator? I think the question is, what's more effective, or do you even have to make a choice about which one would be more effective? What has been your experience?
It's not and or, it's all. So individually posting it on your social media and sharing it with your tribe actually gives other people permission. So I definitely encourage you to do that, because sometimes people just don't know. And so you're educating your tribe, but definitely collaborating with other organizations is very important. We just recently testified at the EPA hearing against PM 2.5, right, about the rollback there, and moms dominated. We could not have been able to do that without volunteers willing to share their voice and to share their stories. And so we're always looking for partners. Other organizations are always looking for volunteers as well. But your voice is necessary, but it is louder when we're a choir.
Yes, I love that. It's not an and or all, and either or, and or, it's an all. I love that. It is an all ways that we can do it repeatedly, over and over again. Speaking of that, over and over, how can we uplift? This is another question. How can we uplift all of us, that have suffered from educational, being economically disadvantaged? How can we use this moment to continue that uplifting? Because there, I think, as Dr. McClain said earlier, there's a lot of attention right now. This is a whole lot of folks that are all of a sudden woke. How do we use this to ensure that we have continued this uplifting?
Yeah,
I want to say, and I'm sure you want to.
I'll jump in on that real quick, and then I'm turning it over very fast to y'all ladies. But real quick to that, I think that we've got to get to a place where we understand how the system works. When COVID hit, immediately they started using the pandemic to pass laws and roll back protections. We've got to do the same. While we've got this momentum right now, we need to hit them with everything. Don't try to go in and negotiate small. Ask for the whole thing and let them push back. And then we go in and we make concessions and we do what we need to do to get where we want to get to. Again, for the civil rights movement, it was negotiation, demonstration, resistance. We've somehow missed that first part, and we go straight to demonstration and resisting. And so we've given out everything by the time we do get an opportunity to sit at the table. If we go in first with negotiation, and then behind that, the demonstration, that shows our power and what we can do collectively. So I'm out of the way now. Y'all can have it. Dr. McClain, do your thing, Dr. McClain. Do your thing.
I just wanted to jump in there for a second, too. In terms of uplifting ourselves during this time, on a spiritual level, Residence in Place has given us a tool for strengthening ourselves and lifting ourselves. It is a time that we can reflect and review and reinforce ourselves, because we had gotten to the point where we was just doing, going. You didn't even know what your house looked like. You forgot what your family looked like, because we all out doing. So part of what we have to do now to continue to keep ourselves uplifted is to do some regenerative work within ourselves. And I'm a prayer girl, so I'm gonna go right straight there. Lots of prayers in different forms, lots of chanting in different forms, lots of singing in different forms, lots of dancing in different forms, lots of being grateful and thankful that you have an opportunity now to express something that you've probably been having repressed and suppressed and oppressed for a long time. It gives us an opportunity to look at internalized oppression, because sometimes we take that thing and we put it inside of us. It's not ours. They force that thing on us, and we have to take it back out so that we can heal ourselves and be whole to go out and do the marathon and the triathlon and all those terms that I don't know about. But we have to take this time to do some meditation, because there is power in meditation. We are guided by the Creator and the angelic hosts and our ancestors when we are being quiet, so that when we go out to implement the strategy that Rev talked about, we are anchored and rooted and ready for any challenge that they throw our way. We're ready.
If we have a moment out, I just want to offer, because some days I have not been okay, right? But it is my colleagues and it is those people that I don't know that may just send a word. We all have a space in this movement. There are so many people that feel like they can't make a difference, or I don't know what to do. And sometimes just encouraging someone is a role, right? Like we all have a role. And so, yeah, as a part of uplifting ourselves, I'm encouraging people to really be introspective. What is it? What is your role in this moment? Because we are all here at this time, at this place for a reason. And so when we choose not to act, we're actually making an inaction, and we're working against what's happening. And so this is all of our fight. Even if you think you have nothing to give, you could give a word, you could pray, you can tell someone you're doing that for them. You can share the message. I know sometimes people are thinking, oh my gosh, why are we sharing all this? Because there are different tribes, but people need to know and they need to hear it from different spaces. And so educate people where you can. But it's hugging us, it's being in it together. That's so important. And understanding that, again, each of us have a role and taking responsibility for that.
Catherine, thank you so much. I think that's a perfect place for us to put a pin in everything that we have breathed in today. I will tell you, I am overflowing with just gratitude and with wisdom from each and every one of you. It has been fulfilling to listen and to learn from you and to just engage in this conversation. And I'm just overwhelmed with the love that I have for not only this work, but the reinvigorating nature of what you've just sort of given to all of us. And I know it's been reflected in the comments from all of our attendees. Before I turn it back over to Tanya for closing us out, I want to say thank you and acknowledge our organizers and Moms Clean Air Force. And I just want to share this with everyone, because to do this today, what we have done for Juneteenth, it was not an accident. It was not a mistake. But you should know that the leadership of this organization, our co-founder, one of our co-founders, Dominique Browning, who's also our senior director, the women that you don't see on this screen, that are actually behind the screen, who even as white women said, we're going to be in the background today. We're going to do everything we can do to help and to support and to use Mom's Clean Air Force to share a stage and a message is so powerful. And I hope that everybody understands just exactly what happened, how inclusive and diverse of an example of what everyone should be doing we just did, because it just happened here. And I don't want anybody to ever say it can't be done, because we just did it. And I know all of us are not only appreciative of this, but we appreciate how we are all working together in this moment. So thank you to all of our folks and team members at Moms that we don't even see right now. We know you're there and we love you, because without all of us working together, this would not have happened. I'm going to go turn it over to Tanya to close this out. Thank you all so much. Tanya, I'm going to give it over to you.
But as Heather said, we just really appreciate this time. You know, there have been many questions like, where do I begin? How do I start? You can start with us in taking the Environmental Justice Pledge, which will probably be in the link on either Blue Jeans or Facebook Live. And so we're committing at Moms Clean Air Force to take a pledge to protect our African American communities. You know, we're saying today and always, we must join together to fight for justice and equity. As a first step, we're pledging to commit to fighting with us, Moms Clean Air Force, for environmental justice. You know, we're taking the pledge to acknowledge this one fact: we do not all breathe the same air. And until we do, we will not be able to live in a just, fair society. We're committing ourselves to working towards environmental justice for all. We're standing against environmental justice, and we're just committing to make our own life about protecting the earth, air, and other natural resources for African American individuals, even Black and Brown communities as well. And so we are inviting everyone to take the pledge with us. Again, it'll probably be in the link, and that's a start. Join us with Moms Clean Air Force. We're at momscleanairforce.org. We would love to have you on as partners, allies, just in the fight with us. We would love, love, love to have you. So I am appreciative for this time. Thank you to the panelists for working with me and having this amazing conversation. Thank you, Heather, for believing that this was going to be something fantastic, because it actually was a remarkable time today. My Friday has started off quite well. So I appreciate this. This has just been amazing. Thank you, audience, for watching from all over the world, and look forward to more opportunities like this. So thank you all. We appreciate the time.